everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. On Monday morning, the college football transfer portal open, okay? So like I said last week, if you were a grad transfer, if your coach left, then you were allowed to enter. But Monday was the first big kind of full chaotic day of the college football transfer portal. And so what I want to do, I want to focus on the guys who entered the portal today on Monday. Just give you a quick who, what, when, where, why of who entered, why they entered, where they could end up. And then, as I said, over the next couple weeks, we will be covering this thing soup to nuts, start to finish, all of the big names, all of the big commitments, all that stuff. So if you're not subscribed to the pod, make sure to do so. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and click the subscribe button, click the like button, put those alerts on because we have a lot to cover. Let's get into the big names. Again, the focus will be on the guys who entered the portal on Monday. Obviously, last week we talked about the Dante Moores, the DJ Uiagalelei. We will continue with that, but let's get to, again, everybody who made news on the opening day of the transfer portal. First big name. It was interesting. There was actually two quarterbacks of teams that finished in the top 12 of the final college football playoff that entered, both of them early Monday morning. And so, frankly, this was obviously premeditated. The first one that I want to get to, how about this? 2 weeks ago, Kyle McCord was the starting quarterback of Ohio State in the Michigan game. He ends up losing, and on Monday morning, many of you probably woke up to this because I was up about probably 8:30 Eastern time, and it had already been announced that he was leaving Ohio State to enter the portal. And so the first reaction, I think a lot of people would say, whoa, my goodness, how could a kid who just started the Ohio State-Michigan game enter the portal? Well, what I can tell you, I don't think this came as a surprise to much of anybody who covers Ohio State, and it wasn't a surprise to the people in the Ohio State building. What became clear to me, I actually had kind of heard this was potentially coming over the weekend, but apparently at some point, Ryan Day basically had a meeting with this kid, said, look, you're a great kid. We like you. We want you to be part of this program, but the starting quarterback job is not guaranteed to you coming back next year. So this isn't a situation like, a Caleb Williams coming into this year at USC or a Michael Penix coming into this year at Washington or whatever, where those programs had complete confidence in the guy leading the offense. Ryan Day basically told him, look, we're recruiting the portal. We're going to bring in another guy, and you are going to have to compete for this job next year, just like you did this year. And so on the one hand, what I will say is I think there's a lot of people that would sit there and say, well, if that's the case, stay and compete, be a man, all that stuff. What I will say is I think as of like probably 2 or 3 years ago, that probably would have been my stance as well. But at the same time, I have kind of evolved. I think it was clear that the coaching staff didn't trust him. I think it was obvious that the fan base didn't trust him. And this is one of those rare instances where I kind of think it's going to be best for all parties to end up kind of splitting up. I said it after the Michigan game. I thought Kyle McCord got a disproportional amount of blame for the loss to Michigan. I'm not saying he was great. I'm not saying he was perfect. He threw two interceptions, one of which directly led to a Michigan touchdown, the other one which officially ended the game and gave Michigan the victory. At the same time, as I said at the time, he also led a scoring drive with about 8 minutes to go. The defense needed a stop to give him the ball back with plenty of time to lead another scoring drive. And in the biggest possession of the season, the defense, led by a $2 million a year defensive coordinator, could not get off the field. 7-minute drive by Michigan ends up kind of ending in a field goal. But I just bring it up. I'm rambling, but the point that I'm trying to make, I thought Kyle McCord got too much blame. I thought the defense let down Michigan at certain times. And ultimately, as I said, I think it's best for all parties that he moves on. In terms of the player, listen, 19 million people watched the Michigan-Ohio State game. You don't need to tell me who he is as a quarterback. You don't need me to tell you who he is as a quarterback. But listen, fourth-year guy, not an elite athlete by any stretch of the imagination. Don't think he is great. Don't think he is the level of a CJ Stroud or a Justin Fields or the guys who preceded him at Ohio State. I don't think he's terrible either. 24 touchdowns, 3,100 yards passing. And I do think in the right situation, he can be a very good quarterback for a lot of different teams. My understanding, talked to some people over the weekend that are familiar with his situation. I think he's going to end up at a Power 5 school, certainly a level probably a little bit below Ohio State. Have heard that Louisville is a school that could be interested in him. Jeff Brom, of course, the quarterback whisperer, has success with pretty much anyone who goes under center for him. Syracuse is an interesting school to follow. Their new head coach, Fran Brown, is from kind of that South, the South Pennsylvania, that Jersey, Pennsylvania area. McCord is from the Philadelphia area. Ironically, he was actually Marvin Harrison Jr.'s quarterback in high school. So I'm going on and on. I'm talking too much here, but the bottom line is I think that's the kind of school that he'll end up at, maybe like a mid-tier ACC school, not quite the Florida States or the Clemsons or whatever, but maybe that next level down. But Kyle McCord moves on. I don't think it's the worst thing for either side. And obviously, Ohio State, if you've been following, they are going to be fine as well, as they are very aggressive in the portal. Another name that came out very early on Monday morning that I think caught a lot of people by surprise. Oklahoma starting quarterback Dillon Gabriel. So Dillon Gabriel, he was a starter for 2 years at Oklahoma, led him to a top 12 finish. They finished 12th in the final college football playoff rankings. They were the only team to beat Texas. He had that iconic drive against Texas to win the game. And when he entered the portal, another guy that I think a lot of people were surprised by. Ultimately, though, I don't think he should be. And here is why. Last recruiting cycle, so 2 cycles ago, if you include this one coming up, Oklahoma brought in a 5-star quarterback named Jackson Arnold. The plan all along was for Jackson Arnold to get limited reps as a freshman behind Dillon Gabriel. And in his second year, he was going to kind of be the guy to lead Oklahoma into the SEC from the Big 12. Honestly, a lot like Arch Manning at Texas, right? Now, we'll see what happens with Arch Manning in Texas because Quinn Ewers might come back. But I just bring it up because this was the plan all along. And what ended up happening was Dillon Gabriel has the extra COVID year. We know the climate of college football where a really good veteran quarterback is probably going to make more than a 5th, 6th, 7th round NFL draft pick in college. And so Dillon Gabriel's like, you don't want me, Oklahoma? That's fine. I'm going to go somewhere else. And I will say, I think that's an important thing here because I saw a lot of negativity on social media about, all these quarterbacks, they're switching. College football is never going to be the same. One, it's the COVID year. There's a lot of guys that have that extra year that are just kind of looking at their options. And 2, this is the new world of college football, right? I don't think I saw anybody enter the portal on Monday that was a clear starter coming back to the school that he wanted to be at. Again, Kyle McCord, he wasn't really wanted there. Dillon Gabriel, they basically, I don't know if it was ever officially told to him, but it was decided that Jackson Arnold is going to be our guy going into the fall of 2024. And so you look at these situations. Will Rogers at Mississippi State would be playing for his 3rd head coach if he decided not to enter the portal. So I just bring it up to very simply say, I don't think it's as crazy as people think. I think it's unique circumstances because of the COVID year, because of NIL or whatever. Now, in terms of Dillon Gabriel, the player, I think you can argue that if you're looking for a veteran quarterback, this guy is as good as he comes, right? He's not perfect. He's not a huge kid. He's about, 6 foot even, he's a little, not very big at all, but the stats are through the roof. This past season, 69% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. How about this? Over a 5-year career so far, played 2 seasons in Central Florida, started his 3rd year, gets hurt, and then starts 2 seasons at Oklahoma. 125 passing touchdowns for Dillon Gabriel. It's insane how productive he's been in college. Now, in terms of a landing spot, a couple things jump out. One, I think there are the schools that he has natural ties to. His former offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, at Oklahoma. By the way, remember, Jeff Lebby was his offensive coordinator at Central Florida. Jeff Lebby takes the Oklahoma job a few years ago. He follows Jeff Lebby to Oklahoma. So wouldn't be surprised if he followed Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State. Also worth noting, who did he start his career under in college? It was Josh Heupel at Tennessee. Remember, Josh Heupel goes to Tennessee. Dillon Gabriel stays behind for a year. And by the time Dillon Gabriel hit the portal the first time, Hendon Hooker was coming back, and there was no spot for Dillon Gabriel. So does it make sense for him to go to Tennessee If Tennessee doesn't believe that the kid Nico Imamavulele, or however you say his name, I apologize. I should know how to say his name, but I'm going to trip over it. If Nico isn't ready, is he a plug-and-play one-year guy? So we'll see what happens there. I think obviously any other school that is in the market for quarterbacks, keep an eye out for Dillon Gabriel. We know that Lincoln Riley is being aggressive in the portal. We know that Oregon will be aggressive in a post-Bo Nix world. So keep an eye on those two schools. The Mississippi State thing makes sense to me. But again, can a guy that accomplished, no disrespect to Mississippi State, but can he play at a level maybe a little higher? Either way, I'm excited to see Dillon Gabriel. A couple other interesting names from Monday. Very interesting one out of Georgia. So Brock Vandergriff, however, another name that is like, I'm tripping over all these names here, but this kid, Brock Vandergriff. So this was a guy. At one point, he was actually the number one quarterback in the high school class of 2021. Now he ends up finishing third, fourth in that ranking, whatever, but former top 50 prospect who has spent the last 3 seasons at Georgia, 2021, 2022, and 2023. He has been the backup to Stetson Bennett. This year, he is the backup to Carson Beck, but he is a former very highly rated recruit who stuck it out at Georgia, and now he's looking for a new home. Really interesting kind of backstory on him. Listen, he almost transferred a year ago, decided to compete with Carson Beck. Then in the spring, remember, in the spring transfer portal cycle, the SEC has put in a rule that SEC schools cannot recruit or accept other players from the SEC. So I think that kid just decided, you know what, it makes more sense for me to come back for the fall than to transfer and not have all my options open. Why do I bring it up? It is because the second that he entered the portal, he was linked to an SEC school, a school that he wouldn't have been able to transfer to in the spring, and that school is the University of Kentucky. Kentucky, listen, they are probably going to be in the market for a transfer quarterback. Remember, Devin Leary is gone after this year. Also, Cutter Boley, the 4-star kid out of Kentucky, who's committed for the class of 2024, he'll be a true freshman next year. So if you have the opportunity to bring in a kid for a year, maybe 2, to kind of transition from the Leary era to the Boley era, like that's a perfect transition. Interesting name to watch there, Brock Vandergriff. Again, he doesn't have a ton of reps, but listen, again, it's tough with Stetson Bennett's a multi-year starter and Carson Beck wins the job. This is a kid, I think he could be like a one-and-done type kid. I think he's really good. I think he can only play one quarterback, but he is a kid that I believe can start for pretty much anywhere. Kentucky's the name to watch out for there. The other thing I thought of that is worth at least acknowledging, in high school, before he ended up at Georgia, he actually committed to Oklahoma, who was coached by a guy named Lincoln Riley at the time. Lincoln Riley, of course, left for USC, and you do wonder, Lincoln Riley it appears as though is in the market for a quarterback. And so could that potentially be a landing spot? He will have no shortage of options, even if he doesn't have a ton of game reps. Couple other notes on quarterbacks. We'll get to some other guys and we will get out of here. From the quarterback perspective, I think one name worth kind of following here going forward. I mentioned Will Rogers a minute ago. I saw that 24/7 Sports has already put in a crystal ball for him, and that is for the University of Washington. Very interesting story with Will Rogers. You know, Will Rogers, the stats are insane, okay? So Will Rogers, how about this? He is a guy that throughout his career, are you ready for this? This is insane. He has 94 touchdown passes in his college career. That's 4th most in SEC history. I think I explained it, but he played for 4 years under Mike Leach. 94 career touchdown passes. That's 4th most in SEC history, and 12,315 passing yards, which is 2nd most in SEC history. As I said, played 3 years under Mike Leach. Really sad situation. We know about Mike Leach's passing right around a year ago now. And after that, decided to stick around, play for Zach Arnett, got hurt. But with an extra year, he is looking around. Very prolific passer. You put him in that Kalen DeBoer offense, I think he has a chance to thrive. That is the early report that he could end up at Washington. Keep an eye out for that. Obviously, Michael Penix will be out after this season. But boy, oh boy, oh boy. You talk about the rich potentially getting richer. Washington going into a playoff game with a potential first rounder in Michael Penix, and they could replace him with one of the most prolific quarterbacks literally in college football history in Will Rogers. A couple other names, one interesting name here, Aiden Childs, a quarterback who entered the portal on Monday from Oregon State, okay? This was a top 60 recruit who played at Oregon State last year, top 60 nationally. He was a guy that everybody on the West Coast wanted, ends up choosing Oregon State, believing in the vision of Jonathan Smith. And then, unfortunately, we know what happened at Oregon State. Pac-12 falls apart. Oregon State's kind of on the outside looking in. Jonathan Smith leaves for Michigan State. And this kid, Aiden Childs, decides, I'm going to open up my recruitment. This is a kid that if the guys and girls that are really into the recruiting, nitty gritty, the evaluators, the scouts, they love this kid. Now, he didn't play a ton. He was, again, DJ Uiagalelei was at Oregon State this past year. Aiden Childs was kind of seen as that bridge player. Not a bridge player. I'm not talking about playing bridge with your grandma. He was a player that was supposed to bridge the gap between DJ and the next generation. And Aiden Childs was supposed to be the quarterback of the future. Unfortunately, things changed. Oregon State's, you know what the situation is at Oregon State. You don't need me to tell you. But Aiden Childs is a very interesting name to follow over these next couple of weeks because he is going to be a high priority, although all signs indicate that he will ultimately end up following Jonathan Smith to Michigan State. As of right now, I think Michigan State lost all 3 quarterbacks off their roster after the season, so there will be plenty of playing time to be had there. Some non-quarterbacks. Let's get into just a few. One, big Walter Nolan entered the portal on Sunday night. And this kid he's the most coveted player in the portal right now, bar none. I understand if you can get a Riley Leonard, Brock Vandergriff, Dylan Gabriel, whoever, quarterback, it's a quarterback-driven sport. But at the same time, do you understand how good Walter Nolan is? Walter Nolan, for people who don't know, played the last 2 years at Texas A&M. He was the number 1 ranked recruit in the class of 2022, not in Texas A&M's class, in America. Defensive lineman, can play inside, can play outside. And really, to his credit, I thought really blossomed this year as a player at Texas A&M. 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and he missed some time with injury. Like, I think that's an important part as well. If you were watching that Tennessee game, he unfortunately went out with injury. And so I just bring it up because that kid enters the portal and he is as coveted as any player in the portal at any position. This is the type of kid that's like a top 5-ish type NFL draft pick. Maybe not top 5, but he's a top 10, top 15 type draft pick. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does. I saw one early report indicate that Alabama could be a focal point for him. Listen, you can't go wrong going to Alabama, right? I also do think, by the way, for what it's worth, I think Mike Elko, Texas A&M, I think they will put the full court press on to get him back. We'll see if they're able to. Walter Nolan, also originally from Tennessee, nearly ended up as a Vol the first time around. So we'll see if Josh Heupel and that crew can get back in the mix. But Walter Nolan, you talk about a marquee player that's in the portal. Walter Nolan is it. A couple other names from Sunday into Monday. I will say, very interesting name in Julian Fleming. So Julian Fleming is the former number 1 ranked wide receiver in the high school class of 2020. Okay. So interesting recruit. He's been at Ohio State for the last 4 years. He's been good, but kind of an interesting story where it's just Ohio State recruits the wide receiver position so well. He's just guys keep kind of beating him out for his spot. So first year he comes in, he's behind Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Then Jackson Smith and Jigbo emerges. Then Marvin Harrison Jr. emerges, and he's just never been able to find that role. By the way, next year, plenty more 5 stars behind him. There's a chance Emeka Ibuka, who's a really good wide receiver, is going to come back for another year. Obviously, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innis, 2 5 stars from last year's class. And oh, by the way, the number 1 high school player in America is a kid named Jeremiah Smith, who is from Florida, who is currently committed to Ohio State as well. So Julian Fleming will hit the portal. Again, he was a good, not great wide receiver at Ohio State over these last couple of years, finished this past season with 26 catches, 34 the year before, including 6 touchdowns. We'll see where he ends up. He's from Pennsylvania. Could Penn State get involved? I'm sure just about everybody will, but Julian Fleming is the name to know there. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'll tell you what. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to take a quick break. First of all, First of all, we're going to be doing these all week, all month, all transfer portal. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, put those notifications on, hit that like button down below.